You'll sign it. You always do. That's what my mother whispered the last time we fought. So, when I got her text, family meeting, Sunday, 4 p.m., mandatory. I already knew what this was. Not a conversation. A performance. They'd be seated in formation, papers ready, voices rehearsed. They thought I'd come in quiet, sit where they told me, nod when they spoke. They thought I'd still be the girl who asked permission to speak at the dinner table. But that version of me, she died the day I found out what they tried to do behind Grandpa's back. So yes, I showed up. Yes, I sat down. And when they slid the contract across the table, I smiled, reached into my bag, and said, "Here I have something I want to show you all." I arrived at exactly 3:59 p.m. My mother's house hadn't changed. The same manicured lawn, the same red bricks she insisted made the place look established. But today, something felt different. There was a strange, quiet knot, the peaceful kind, but the kind that made your skin itch. She opened the door before I could knock, already smiling like a politician. "Rachel, sweetheart." Right on time. Her tone was sweet enough to rot teeth. I followed her into the living room, where the scene had already been staged. The curtains were drawn. The coffee table had been pushed back. 4 chairs were arranged in a half circle, facing one single chair mine. It looked like a job interview, or an interrogation. My Aunt Laura sat to the right, clutching a manila folder like it was a Bible. Kyle, my cousin, was beside her, hunched forward, elbows on knees, eyes flicking toward the floor. And to the left 2 men in pressed navy suits, legal pads in hand, briefcases closed but ready. I didn't need introductions. These weren't lawyers. They were here to persuade. "Please, sit," my mother gestured with performative grace. I said nothing, choosing the only chair available, the one they'd placed dead center, under the softest spotlight from the ceiling fan. I laid my bag across my lap, resting my hands on it. One of the suited men cleared his throat. "Ms. Monroe, thank you for joining us. We know these matters can be delicate." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean inheritance?" He nodded, ignoring the sarcasm. "This isn't about questioning your grandfather's wishes. It's about unity. Family cohesion." My mother cut in. "Rachel, honey, no one's trying to take anything from you. We're just asking you to consider what's fair. You're young. You have time. But the rest of us, we've struggled." I looked around the room. Aunt Laura, in her designer shoes. Kyle, who just posted a photo last week of his new motorbike. And my mother, wearing pearls she claimed were passed down. But I knew she bought them after Grandpa's last hospital stay with his credit card. I leaned back slightly. "Is this the part where someone slides papers across the table?" My mother didn't blink. Instead, she smiled wider and nodded to the man on the left. He opened his briefcase, took out a stack of documents, and gently placed them in front of me. "It's a voluntary redistribution agreement," he said. "You'd still retain a comfortable portion 15 while ensuring the rest is shared among your family." Comfortable. Like they were doing me a favor. My fingers tapped the edge of my bag slowly. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Because I already knew what I was going to do. No one moved as I picked up the document. The paper was thick-weighted, professional, like they wanted the signature to feel important. But I didn't even glance at the words. I didn't need to. I already knew what they said. "Rachel," Aunt Laura began, her voice low and trembling. "We know this isn't easy. Your grandfather, he loved you. That's true. But he also loved all of us. This," she motioned to the papers, "this just reflects what he would have wanted if he'd been thinking clearly." "If?" I repeated, my tone flat. My mother sighed like a martyr in a soap opera. "He wasn't well, sweetheart. You saw it too," repeated himself. "He forgot things. You can't tell me you didn't notice." "He updated his will 6 weeks before he passed," I replied calmly. "Had it notarized, witnessed, and sent a copy to his accountant. Doesn't sound that confused to me." Kyle shifted in his seat. I caught the flicker of guilt behind his eyes. "But, baby," my mother said, softening her voice like she used to when she wanted me to confess to something I didn't do. You have to understand what this is doing to the family. We're not trying to hurt you. We're just asking you to do the right thing. I looked at her, really looked. The perfect posture, the carefully curled hair, the expensive perfume that had always reminded me of cold marble countertops. She wasn't asking, she was cornering. We're family, she continued. We look out for each other. That's how your grandfather built his legacy with family. Don't let this divide us. The irony nearly made me laugh, because when Grandpa was sick, I was the only one who showed up. I was the one driving him to appointments, sitting through insurance calls, organizing his bills. They all had reasons not to be there. Too busy, out of town, emotionally overwhelmed. But now they remembered they were family. Can I ask something? I said, setting the document down, still unsigned. Of course, one of the suited men replied quickly. If I sign this giveaway 85% of what my grandfather left me, what exactly changes? Silence. I turned to Aunt Laura. Do you stop pretending I'm ungrateful? To Kyle. Do you stop telling people I stole what was never yours? Then finally, to my mother. Do you stop needing more? She blinked, but didn't answer. I leaned forward, hands folded neatly. I'm not looking for conflict, but don't mistake that for weakness. Then, I reached into my bag slowly. They all watched me. The paper they'd handed me lay untouched on the table. Because, before anyone signs anything, I said, voice steady, I have something I'd like to show you all. I unzipped my bag slowly, deliberately, like someone peeling back layers of a lie. Then I pulled it out, a plain ivory envelope. Not thick, not dramatic. Just neat, sealed, and unmistakably addressed in my grandfather's handwriting. I laid it down on the table without a word. My mother's eyes narrowed. What is that? I call it insurance, I said quietly, but you might call it something else. Proof. Aunt Laura leaned forward. Rachel, what are you doing? I'm clarifying the story, I replied, then looked at the two suited men. You've been handed one version. Let me show you the original. I opened the envelope and slid out 3 sheets. The first a scanned copy of Grandpa's original will. The handwritten version. Same clauses, same bequests, but with a postscript. To Rachel, leave not only the assets but the reasons behind them, because she's the only one who didn't ask me for anything until I was gone. I placed it down in front of them. One of the men blinked, already reaching for it. I stopped him. Wait, it gets better. The second sheet. A bank transfer confirmation from 2 months before Grandpa's death. 25, 0 wired to Laura T. Duncan, memo line. Emergency support for Kyle's child's surgery. I turned to Kyle. You told me she needed surgery that week, but this? I said, sliding my phone onto the table, screen already unlocked to an Instagram post. Was you that same weekend in Vegas? Bottle service, new suit, table full of chips. Caption, needed this escape, feeling blessed. Kyle flushed. It wasn't. I held up a hand. Save it. Then came the third sheet. A printed receipt for a wire transfer to a luxury furniture retailer. Amount, $13,700. Recipient, Susan Monroe, mother. Date, 3 days after Grandpa entered the hospital for the last time. You told me, I said, staring at her now, that you couldn't afford to visit him that weekend. But I guess a new dining set was more urgent. She slammed her palm on the table. How dare you dig through private accounts? These weren't private, they were Grandpa's, and he documented everything. You should have known better. The two suited men exchanged glances. Their confidence had begun to melt into something else. Calculation. Miss Monroe, one of them said carefully, was this information disclosed during the estate briefing? My mother's jaw locked. This is irrelevant, she's twisting. I cut in. And here's the last thing. I reached back into the envelope and pulled out a flash drive. This has a recording. It's from a conversation my mother had with Grandpa's hospice nurse. In it, she says, and I quote, once he's gone, I'll convince Rachel to sign it all over. She's always been too soft to fight back. For the first time, no one spoke. I leaned back. The envelope lay open. The papers spread out like evidence on a courtroom table. My hands rested gently on the folder in my lap. Then I smiled. Calm. Complete. You wanted a signature, I said. But before we decide who signs, what maybe we should all be honest about who we really are. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was suffocating. Aunt Laura was the first to recover. This is out of line, Rachel. Bringing up old transfers, private moments, she wouldn't have wanted this. I tilted my head. He didn't want to be used. That's what he said. And I'm here to make sure he wasn't. Kyle stood up abruptly, pacing a few steps before sitting back down, rubbing his face with both hands. I didn't know she used my name for the transfer, he muttered. She just said Grandpa wanted to help. My mother snapped toward him. Don't start turning on me, Kyle. I gave you everything. I vouched for you when you got arrested. I paid for. Enough, I said, voice low but steady. You're not losing control of the room by accident. You're losing it because the truth finally has weight. The two men in suits still hadn't spoken. One of them adjusted his tie and looked toward my mother. Mrs. Monroe, were we made aware of this recording? Or the previous transactions? She didn't answer. She just stared at me like I'd betrayed her. I'm not your enemy, I told her. But I won't play the role of the obedient daughter who hands over the keys to someone else's kingdom. I raised you, she hissed, suddenly sharp. I carried you for 9 months, changed your diapers, and this is how you repay me? I nodded slowly. You raised me, but Grandpa taught me what integrity looks like. Her eyes narrowed. So what now? You think this little performance makes you the hero? No, I said, standing. I think it makes me free. I turned to Kyle. You say you didn't know? Fine, I believe you. But moving forward, don't let other people define what you owe. His eyes flicked up at me, and for the first time since I'd arrived, I saw something new there, something fragile and honest. I gathered my documents slowly, the way someone closes a chapter they've reread one too many times. My fingers moved without trembling. Behind me, the others still sat frozen in their chairs, some ashamed, some exposed, all unprepared. I looked at the two men in suits one last time. This isn't a family dispute, it's an inheritance defense, and we're done here. They nodded quietly. I walked toward the door, my mother's voice trailing after me. You'll regret this. I paused, hand on the knob. No, I said without turning back. I regret waiting this long to stop pretending any of this was love. Then I opened the door and stepped into the air. Crisp. Quiet. Mine. The air outside felt sharper than I remembered. Or maybe it just felt real. I didn't expect footsteps behind me, but they came anyways, oft, hesitant, stopping just short of the front porch. It was Kyle. He stood there, hands in the pockets of his hoodie, shoulders slumped like a kid waiting for detention. For a while, neither of us said anything. Then he cleared his throat. I didn't know she'd lie. About the surgery. About using my name. I nodded, not looking at him. I believe you. He shifted on his feet. You didn't have to defend me in there. After what I did, you were dragged into a system that rewarded silence, I said, turning to him. That doesn't mean you have to stay in it. He looked surprised by that. Then something softer passed across his face. Shame, maybe. Or the first breath of relief. Can I ask you something? He said. I raised an eyebrow. Did Grandpa really... was that all true? The letter, the postscript, the money? I reached into my bag again, not to pull out more evidence, but something quieter. A folded piece of notebook paper, faded, creased from years of being opened and read. I handed it to him. To Rachel and Kyle. If this world ever turns against you, remember, you don't need to prove your worth to the ones who forgot how to see it. Love builds legacy. Fear destroys it. He read it slowly, twice, then held it like it might crumble. I thought he hated me, Kyle murmured. He barely spoke to me at the end. I smiled gently. He didn't hate you. He just didn't know what you were becoming yet. The wind shifted. He blinked hard. You know, I said, there's an open internship in Grandpa's old office. It's unpaid, inconvenient, and full of spreadsheets. But it's real work. You up for it? His head jerked up. Seriously? Completely. But if you show up late, I'm docking your future imaginary salary. He let out a short, surprised laugh, the kind that sounds like someone remembering how. I'll bring coffee, he said. Good. Bring mine black. As we walked to my car, the silence between us felt different. It wasn't awkward or heavy. It was earned. At the passenger door, he paused. So, what happens now? I looked up at the house behind us. The curtains were still drawn, the war was over, but the damage would echo. Now, I said, we rebuild, quietly, thoroughly, and in the image of someone who never wanted to see this family broken in the first place. 2 days later, I returned to the house Grandpa left me. The key felt heavier than I remembered. Maybe because this time, it wasn't just a way to get in, it was a symbol of everything I now carried. The click of the lock echoed into a space untouched since the funeral. Dust swirled in shafts of light. The furniture was covered in white sheets, but the stillness wasn't cold, it felt paused, like a breath waiting to be exhaled. I made my way straight to his study. The air there was different, warmer, still faintly smelled of cedar and old paper. His desk sat exactly as I remembered, papers neatly stacked, pens aligned like soldiers on parade. I didn't sit right away. I stood at the threshold, unsure if I was stepping into the past or the beginning of something new. Eventually, I opened the bottom drawer. His journal was there. Dark green leather, corners soft from years of use. I flipped past pages of figures, vendor names, timber costs. Then I found this thoughts, written in tight, slanted cursive. Legacy isn't about who wants it. It's about who can carry it without breaking. Another entry, dated the month before he died. Rachel sees numbers the way I see grain and wood. She builds slow, without shortcuts. I don't know if she'll be loved for it, but she'll be right. I sat down at the desk, and for the first time since the family meeting, I let myself cry. Not out of grief, not out of anger, but from the weight of knowing he had seen me, clearly and completely, when no one else had even tried. When the tears stopped, I picked up a pen and made a list. Review all contracts with new vendors. Meet Angela to finalize estate filings. Set up educational fund for Kyle, small, structured, and with oversight. Reopen office under new name, Vance, Monroe Materials. Start eco initiative. Grandpa once dreamed about recycled lumber and green thermal concrete. It felt good to write, not just react but plan. Later that afternoon, I met Angela for lunch. I handed her the journal. She flipped through it, eyes pausing at certain lines, her brow rising. This, she said, is gold. This isn't just paperwork. This seals intent, philosophy, continuity. Probate court will respect this. I nodded. I'm not fighting anymore. I'm preserving. Angela smiled. And building. Exactly. As I signed the last document to officially transfer the property, Angela looked at me. You know, she said, your mother's silence might be the biggest gift you've been given. I nodded. Because now, I replied, I get to hear myself think. 1 week later, the locks on Grandpa's old warehouse clicked open for the first time in months. The air inside was stale, tinged with sawdust and rust, but the bones of the place were strong. The work tables were still where we left them. The corkboard still held yellowing notes in his handwriting. It wasn't a graveyard. It was a sleeping giant. I stood in the center of the floor, arms crossed, letting the silence settle around me. Then I heard the footsteps. Kyle walked in, wearing jeans that didn't quite fit, and a t-shirt with the logo of a band I didn't recognize. He looked like he didn't belong, but also like he wanted to. You're early, I said. You said 8 a.m. I did. I nodded, smiling slightly. Didn't think you'd take that literally. I didn't want to mess this up. I handed him a clipboard. You won't, but you will earn it. He looked at the checklist. Equipment inventory, safety report, spreadsheet updates. Looks technical. It is, I replied. We don't build shortcuts here. He gave a short nod, something almost reverent, and headed toward the back office. As he worked, I unpacked boxes from storage. Each one held memories I hadn't realized I was saving. Blueprints Grandpa had drawn by hand, client thank you, letters from 20 years ago, and a frame with a quote he used to keep above his desk. Do it slow, do it solid, do it once. I hung it back where it belonged. That afternoon, over sandwiches from the corner deli, Kyle asked, You really think I can be part of this? I looked at him, at the smudge of grease on his cheek, at the ink on his wrist from jotting numbers on the fly. I think you already are. He nodded, then hesitated. I still feel guilty. You're allowed to, I said. But don't confuse guilt with loyalty. The difference is whether you change. He looked out across the warehouse, at everything we still had to fix. I want to, he said. Then start with tomorrow's shift, I replied. We've got an old furnace to rewire and a new supplier to vet. His eyes lit up, in a way I hadn't seen since we were kids back, when family wasn't a battlefield yet. We finished lunch in quiet agreement. By the end of the week, I'd hired 2 more former employees who'd worked with Grandpa for over a decade. They shook my hand, not out of pity but because they saw something in my posture, my voice, the way I looked them in the eye. Not a girl playing boss. 6 months later, we officially reopened under a new name. Vance, Monroe Materials. It wasn't flashy, but it was rooted, familiar, honest. We didn't make headlines. We didn't cut ribbons with golden scissors. We just opened the doors, flicked on the lights, and got to work. Kyle now ran the eco-initiative Grandpa had once dreamed off recycled timber, low-emission composites, community reuse programs. He still made mistakes. But now he logged them, learned from them, stayed late to fix them. One evening, as we were closing up, I found him rereading one of Grandpa's old journals in the break room. He didn't look up when I entered. He just said, He really did write everything down. Even things he never said aloud, I replied. He looked up then. You think he'd be proud? I paused, then nodded. Yes. But more than they'd feel understood. Karami cousins started sending emails. Small, quiet things. First an apology, then a recipe Grandpa used to love, then a scan of an old photo, all of us at the summer cabin, smiling in a way that now felt both innocent and oblivious. I didn't ignore her, but I didn't rush to reply, either. Some doors don't slam shut. They just open slightly, and you decide how far to let them swing. My mother never reached out. She vanished into another zip code, or another country, or another version of herself. I saw her name once in a gala newsletter listed as an anonymous donor to an art museum she'd never visited. That was her language. Appearances, distance, spin. Angela, my lawyer, once asked if I planned to confront her again. No, I said. Some people need to see a mirror, others will just keep rearranging the room. And me? I finally slept without flinching when the phone buzzed. I drank coffee in Grandpa's old mug. I paid every employee on time. And I wrote new policies based on old values. But most of all, I stayed small, where it mattered. Not invisible, not diminished. Just steady, clear. Because what Grandpa left me wasn't just property. It was the right to define value for myself. Not in what I gave away to be liked, but in what I protected when no one else would. In one of his final journal entries, Grandpa had scribbled a single line. Rachel won't always be the favorite, but she'll be the one who lasts. I taped that page above my new desk. He was right. UT the next chapter.